Hi guys, I'm Katie Room from Periapsis Press, where I review indie sci-fi and fantasy books. Today we are launching our Periapsis Discord community book club. We're starting with Silence and Starsong, Volume 1, Number 1, compiled by Joseph W. Knowles. And today we'll be discussing the very first short story titled A Matter of Honor by Jason McHuston. And if you guys are interested in joining my Discord and participating in this discussion in the future, you can reach out to me either on Twitter at redhedgedragon or through my website, periapsispress.com. With me today, I have Patrick, who's a member from my Discord. You may recognize his name from the chat. I honestly don't even know what your last name is.
That's all right.
But he runs a podcast called Cave to the Cross. Do you want to just talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I offer nothing other than I read books and I say I like them or I don't like them. And that's about the extent of my expertise here. But I do enjoy reading, and my show is to take the books that are on the shelves behind me and actually take them off the shelves and then open them and then proceed to read them. And so what my mentor and I do is we read them along with the audience, especially things like apologetics or theology, or things that you bought the book and it looked good on your shelf, or you'll say, I'll get to that one day, or I open it up and there's a bunch of big words. And so I'm the foil for the audience. So if I can understand it, then you have a much, much greater opportunity to. And then my mentor is a philosophy professor. And so we kind of break it down from there. I like sci-fi most of all, but I dip my toes into the other brands of lesser sci-fi called fantasy. So those are my big things. Yes, exactly.
Isn't sci-fi actually fantasy?
I mean, we can get into that whole long discussion. Yes.
Doug Wise may also be joining us a little bit later. We'll see. Before we start, just since this is the first discussion for this collection, I thought that I would talk a little bit about the editor's note. If you guys are familiar with me, you know that I really like the foreword and the introduction and like all the things that go with an anthology. Mm-hmm. The editor's note is sadly located at the back of the book, which, because I was looking for it, I found. It really ought to be at the beginning.
But I agree, it should have been.
It's sort of combined with the thank yous, so oh well. But I like to get a sense from these of like the larger scope and the grander aim, right, of what the collection is trying to do. And if I call it an anthology or a magazine or whatever, it's all of those things. So you'll have to forgive me. So I'll just like pull like a few tiny quotes, and you guys will either have to trust me that I'm accurately reflecting what he's trying to say, or you should read it yourselves. So he starts out talking about sort of modern science fiction and says, what is wrong with most of these tales of wonder is that they are all steeped in pure and unadulterated materialism. And then skipping down, he says, this is by design. If you don't believe in the soul, you won't guard it. Skipping down again, the solution is to drop the orc way of thinking, drop the science fiction materialism and the loser heroes, and consider the true meaning of the physical reality. And what he's talking about with the true meaning is how, like, what God has said the purpose of these sort of mundane, wondrous things are, right? And then closer to the end, he says, these stories are about the different perspective, the far older and far more useful perspective. We are not so much killing science as we are killing science fiction, though you may use redeem if you'd like.
Yes.
So I think that's really interesting. And without knowing anything beyond this editor's note, I'm going to kick it over to Patrick and say, what do you think that means? Killing science fiction.
Yeah. Well, I will say, Joseph's a great guy. He's a great Twitter follow, and he hosts a history podcast as well. So I had the pleasure of reading some of his fiction as he wrote it, which made me feel like 1998 vibes again, which was great, where you could like discover an author and he would like write the chapter and then rewrite it, and you could kind of follow along. It was like early Patreon type deal that was
Nice.
really neat. That was that was a lot of fun. So he's an author in and of himself, and yes, he's a Christian who uh, gathered, I will say, a loose confederation under the guise of the Christian moniker, as is probably known throughout the world. That's about as charitable as I can get it for these authors. And so the killing science fiction, it's the problem that I have with the classic sci-fi, which I love. So I always blame the direction that sci-fi took based on atheistic people who were there first. So, the Arthur C. Clarke, the Larry Nivens, who uh, wanted to talk about the human condition, but then said, well, in the future, just religion evaporates and it's not there. And so you lose pieces of that. Now, there are people who wrote, so I have an entire collection of an author named James Blish who wrote specifically about religiosity within sci-fi, that I'm like, oh, these are interesting stories that, while they might not be like, Jesus comes on Mars, which is actually Joseph Farmer wrote that story, but has elements of religiosity to talk about like the human condition. And then you're talking about 50 sci-fi, so everyone's smoking and uh, you know
Yeah.
e- everyone's named Zap Brannigan and stuff like that. Um, so once we get to the point where we're at today, why aren't we having the pale blue dot, the vastness of space? You're insignificant, but you're still fighting against the void, the insurmountable odds. And so where's hope? Hope is just like, well, the species continues, and that's all well and good. But when fiction says something about me, the reader, because again, uh, sorry, I might be too preachy on this, but uh, when we read a story of Superman, if we put ourselves in that world, or the author's trying to communicate to us, he has to do so, or she has to do so, based on context of us. So Superman can't lift a Devithify because you don't know what that is, and so if there's no relation to you, the reader, um, you know, it's up to the author to explain that, but it's always going to be in the context of you. And so I think what the community here, that's the authors here, are trying to do is to kind of uh, smash that uh, current idea of just everything is downtrodden, everything is we're just talking about the human condition, but we're not really, because we're not talking about everything. Or uh, you know uh, Jodie Foster, or the person from Contact, will say, they should have brought a poet in the book. They brought a lot more people and everyone remembered. But okay, but for what purpose and for what end? Just to continue the thing. But here's the redemption part: is these stories take place within the confines of God's world, and they're they do speak to the human condition, where you're still having a relatable um, um, a story foisted upon you, but there's a deeper context to it. Not just that God exists, but that um, within these worlds, but um, that there is the good and evil that continues on, and um, finds that self traced back to the origin of the meta narrative, or whatever fancy term you book authors like to talk about, the meta myth of humanity. And so we tell stories because God's a storyteller, and he does things both in fiction. So God writes fiction, but he also does it in nonfiction as well. And as I was telling my daughters the other day, is um, we think we always want to see like the alien world out there. It would be cool to travel to Mars and discover this underground civilization where Martians are still living and not taking over the world in this version. But you go look at the wings of a dragonfly, and you're like, oh my goodness, how does it fly? How does it maintain? How can I be translucent and the body support itself? And we're just so used to the humdrum of it, but we're not understanding it because we're so close to it. And so I think the killing the sci-fi is that the modern day sci-fi of uh we're going to tell a story, but we're missing various big swaths of elements, and you can read more than just the drunk hero who kind of gets sober and does the right thing, almost stumbles upon it. So
Hmm.
a long-winded answer to tell you I might know maybe just a little bit of what he's talking about.
I think one of the parts in the editor's note that I didn't read, where he talks about how he says, for instance, talking about the true meaning of the physical reality, the symbolic meaning of the tree as a metaphor between heaven and earth is more important than learning about photosynthesis. And I wanted to push back on that just a little bit, because kind of what you're talking about, right? Like
Mhm.
they both of those things are capture the wonder of the true myth, right? One is obviously symbolic, but the other is the minutia of our world, the you know the very, very detailed level. Like, God made that for us to discover, and just the fact that it's already been quote unquote discovered and can be explained doesn't make it any less wondrous that that's how it works.
Yeah, yeah. Jesus and the fig tree, right? He out of all the fig trees he could ever walk up to in all of history, in all of Jerusalem, in the place where the figs are the figgiest, and he finds the one tree that just so happens to illuminate a story about how it should have figs, and the fact that it doesn't shows that it's out of whack. And so, okay, now we're talking about the general grace of God within the confines of it makes them rain on the just and the unjust. The sun rises and the sun sets. We can know those things no matter who we are. Can we justify them? That's up to the Christian worldview to be able to align that precisely. But then you have, well, what does it mean? Why is he angry? If he's God, why is he angry at this fig tree for not producing thing? Shouldn't he know this? It's like, yes, absolutely. But it's that it's a it's also a fig tree that represents, present day Israel, present day as in his present day, today Israel as well, but present day Israel to him, who has seen the great light, has photosynthesized, who has grown and produced no fruit, and so he curses it never to produce again. But ultimately, the vine that um, is from the true vine comes about, and so you have the photosynthesis with the ultimate meaning of why the fig tree didn't fig.
Okay. Uh, Thank you to everybody who didn't come to talk about the editor's note. I appreciate you guys letting me nerd out about the grander scheme of things. um, so the short story that we're talking about today is A Matter of Honor by Jason McCuston. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
The
I'm
great thing
not
about
certain.
readers is we never know how to pronounce the words that we interact with. So
Yep.
yeah, we're smart until we have to talk about them.
Right. um, I will actually read the tagline. Decades of religious war have forced friends and foes under one roof for the night. Will bonds of friendship and fragments of a common faith be enough to protect them from a supernatural enemy? Uh, and then Doug Wise posted in the Discord community really nice, like, setup for the story. So I'm just going to steal it. And if he was here, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. um, so he said the first few pages conveyed the general confusion of religio political allegiances in place at the end of the 30 Years' War, and transfer it to the reader. I know very, very little about the 30 Years' War. So I hope that you know a little bit more than I do, Patrick.
It wasn't 30 years. Usually they rounded. Yes.
And then he gives a breakdown of the cast. I am not going to pronounce their full names. I'm just going to pronounce their first names because I'm fairly sure I can nail the first name.
Yeah. But can you do it without an accent?
No.
That's Pierre. Okay.
So 2 soldiers of the Anti-Imperial Alliance, which I'm sure is important to anybody who knows about the 30 Years' War more than I do. Dirk, who is our main character, he is Dutch and a Protestant, and Pierre, who is French and Catholic. And they have come to duel 2 soldiers on the Imperial side, Franz, who is Austrian and Catholic, and Sancho, who is Aragonese, which is, I guess, Spanish-ish.
Right. Yeah.
And okay, and he's also Catholic. But they run into an unrelated duel between two more anti-imperials who are friends. Sten, who's Swedish and Protestant, and Magnus, who is Saxon or German and Protestant.
You know, I'm sick of modern day sci-fi having these DEI requirements where everyone is just lumped in here. You know, I thought we were getting something new. But...
It's like there's 6 different nationalities here. There's 6 characters, 6 nationalities.
Yeah.
3 sets of friends.
World wars were a lot smaller back then.
And two political like factions, imperial versus anti-imperial. So, but it all just ramps up the tension, right? That all of these like, and then what ends up happening is basically the elderly pub owner, to get them out of her space, sends them on a quest.
Yeah. Which I love. So we recently kind of read a book kind of in the community. The I think it was the Paladin one.
Okay, yeah.
Where people would just kind of like go on quest, and like there was no like overarching storyline. It was just like, here's a thing that we did. We needed to get the bodies of our friends to bury them properly. And I just like how that's there, because it feels very like this is normal day life without the impending doom of everything. Like if you read like the Expanse series, everything was just like sorry, my likes are coming out here. Everything was part of the grand narrative that pushed the story along, and no one just did a job. The thing that I always asked with it, especially the show, is like, are they getting paid? Like they have this advanced warship. How are they refueling and refunding? Are just people like saying we need them on the front lines, and so here's a bunch of warheads and Gatling guns. I don't, not that I need like every like what's the basic currency here? It's like, oh, it's gold plated latinum. Okay, sure, but it's just nice to have like go on this quest, see who can be manly enough, and they just go, okay, we have time to kill. It just seems very like on brand for all these like guys who are drinking and testosterone, and like
you just feel like they are out looking for trouble to prove themselves. It's like a quest to prove both how honorable and my faith, like how genuine my faith is. This is perfect.
It's like the match of all the worlds together.
But they all have to act like they don't really care about it.
and along the way too, prove themselves, they almost duel again. There's that big headed.
uh, I really liked that though. It meant that you weren't sure what was going to happen.
Right.
You're like, okay, so they could end up fighting each other along friendship lines, or like Imperials versus anti-Imperials, or Catholics versus Protestant. We just don't know which way the conversation is going to go yet.
Right. Or the big crescendo, and then the main character gets the sword in the back, and
Yeah.
oh, he's betrayed. Oh, you Calvinist dog, you.
I I I think I found this refreshing. Just this element of like, yeah, we could end up fighting each other anytime, just because a lot of the like generally Christian fiction that I've read, the sci-fi fantasy type stuff, has been so like unspecific, I guess is my critique, right? With their uh like theological differences and um like where's the line drawn between people. Uh
Mm,
I think probably because in our current culture, it there's a lot of like, if we all just get along, right? We all believe sort of the same thing at at the root of it. So in this fantasy setting, they should all just be able to just uh, fight the demons together. And
mhm.
when they have downtime later, yeah,
Yeah.
because they're all living together as part of like a knights thing, right? And it doesn't matter what their affiliations are. They're not going to argue or or disagree.
Right. Well, and the our Dirk and his friend are Protestant and Catholic, and his friend, the Catholic guy, goes against one of the other guys, and says like, "Oh, you're Luther and Calvin can all go to hell" type deal, and he
Yeah.
just turns around and he's just like, "Dude, like we haven't fought like this before," and he like eventually apologizes to him later on, but it was just like a neat little like. I mean, I know he did it to goad the other guy on, but still, it hurts a little bit.
Yeah. uh, do you think the old lady lied to them? I was kind of a little bit confused on that. Like
Oh,
she
yeah,
sends them to this like haunted church ruin where their faith is going to be tested. And they have to stay the night and say the Lord's Prayer. Because anybody who says the Lord's Prayer but doesn't have like true faith dies.
yeah, yeah. Never to return. Yeah, I never trust an old hag, especially if she's got a beautiful woman like in the shadows behind her, and
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one does. I'm just saying.
Well, I think even at one point somebody says, "Were they witches?" Like
Right. Yeah,
try to
yeah,
like
and like before anything kicks off too, they're just like, "Oh, this is really
right like
spooky.
nothing.
I wonder if this was a coven of witches sent us to our doom." Yeah.
But like
And that's when the Catholics pair off, and then the Protestants. The guy's like, "All right, we'll say the Lord's Prayer, the Catholics first, and then the Protestants, because we were here first."
right.
He does it in the Latin, and then the bastard tongue of the English comes out, and you say, "For thine is the kingdom, the glory, and the power forever." Ha ha! I can say it, you can't. Yeah. Well,
I Go
so
for it.
for the church history background to this, I really like this because setting it. I don't know if it's set in Munster, but the talk of the Munster uprising is in here, and there are characters that come out, and if you ever just Google like Munster Rebellion and the Three Cages, and you just realize if we did to communists what they did to communists before it was communism back then, we'd need a few more cages, but we'd probably have less communists in the world. And it was just neat to see someone who, like, the author understood both the history of the 30 Years War, obviously, but also some of the cool details because um, the 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 two men, it's what is it, Jan Marthus and Jan Vandelen, and like if you read the history, you're like, no, I'm reading a fantasy novel. This is the the wizard and then Darth Vader is essentially these two people that come out, and the fact that they like seem to perform types of miracles, and they do things that you really shouldn't do, especially in this uprising to keep Munster in rebellion for as long as they did, and the fact that they had such sway, it's amazing to um, know the background, and so that's what added the level of spookiness to me. Because when they said Munster, I was also, it sounds like monster, which is always fun. But Munster, Germany, is where kind of that took place, so it added that like mystique of what happened during the rebellion there.
Sure.
Um, that I'm like, okay, I'm hooked because they it's like when someone mentions like, oh, Roswell, New Mexico, and you're like, oh, we're gonna talk about aliens.
So they listen to her, and they go. They almost duel on the way. They decide to drink in the church ruins. They're going to a haunted supernatural place.
They need to watch more horror movies, never have sex, never do drugs, never drink or say I'll be right back. So just saying.
It's common sense at this
Hmm.
point, right?
Yeah. The tropes are there.
Do you think that their faith was tested genuinely, or was that just a hook for them to go?
Um, so I guess we're spoiling it to say that something happened. So
Right,
something was
right.
amiss at the spooky castle. Because if I'm like, this is just a haunted house. This is the haunted house. So the question then is, were the monsters physical or spiritual? And I tend to lean on the other side because of how they got rid of them. If that's not too spoilerishy.
No, spoilers and
Okay, all right. Definitely read it. Read the book. So
yeah, so basically undead witches climb out of the fire, and they're burning corpses that try to kill them. And it's epic. It's very, very cool.
the fact that sword pierces and explosions rip body parts away, I would say that maybe there's an element of it, but for the most part, I believe that these are more monsters in the way of werewolves rather than of
Sure.
vampires.
But did they come out because somebody failed the test, right? Like, because they don't really appear until the last person has said the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
The German guy, right?
It's always the Germans. I'm
So
just saying.
is it that he did not have a the true faith, right? They are thinking like, we're going to divide, like, is it Catholics or Protestants who have the true faith? Like, and I'm like, okay, is it this German guy who's the problem? Right?
Maybe the author doesn't want to tip his hand in who he wants to win.
Right. But was their appearance linked supernaturally somehow to the test that the lady specifically laid out, or was it just this was a supernatural space, like, place, and monsters happen to be there?
I just think it took them a while. So it's like when the suit of armor falls into the well in
Sure.
uh, the movie that we always seem to talk about, but or the series we always seem to talk about. But I don't want to be the person to bring it up. But I think it was just create enough noise that it alerted them to the smell of man flesh. So,
Because I think I probably would agree with you that the story, it does not seem to be trying to make a point about faith,
right.
um, in that way.
In that way, right? In that way.
Um, what what would you say you think that the takeaway is supposed to be? That the
So the the forging at the beginning is there's essentially standing guard, waiting for like a peace treaty to be signed. That's why they don't want to. That's why our main character, not Fritz, uh Reeked, uh
Dirk
the uh, Dirk, maybe.
Dirk
Yeah, yeah. The good Protestant. He
just look back over my notes.
I know. I went off the page that had all the names on it. Um, uh, so he's trying to keep everyone calm because wars tend, if the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand taught us anything, as we all remember, is that the death of one person can kick off just the most stupidest of wars ever conceived by man, so that it creates two giant wars. And so I think the takeaway is, um, there could be lasting peace with the common enemy of, hey, there are far stranger things in this world that we should protect ourselves from, and that's clearly going to be the Muslim army that is going to come soon. No, I'm sure that's not the takeaway fully, but the fact that it's the forging of the brotherhood within, especially within the confines of, uh, I don't want to say shared faith because that trivializes everyone's take on that discussion, but
Right.
I would say at least shared brotherhood for soldiers. So, soldiers, no matter who you are, can make the same dead baby jokes, and you can pick out the soldiers who laugh because they're the ones that like heard the joke before, and they know to gravitate towards each other. Um, and so I think that's where that's where the theme ultimately comes up with, especially the overt gesture that our main character does at the end, and the potential sacrifice of everyone else as well. Everyone kind of respects that, and uh, kind of the idea of, uh, it's a good system if you can keep it type deal.
Hmm.
It tends to ring out there the loudest for me, rather than, I think the faith stuff kind of drops away as the tension builder, especially at the beginning, but more so like, um, there's a few parting shots, but it's
Right.
gallows humor. It's like, well, I wouldn't want you to die among these Catholics and desecrate the ground.
Yeah, yeah. It was,
And the twirling of the mustache, and it
yeah.
flakes off is very a very nice touch there.
I like that too. Um, yeah, like he says, I still think you a rebel and a heretic, but you're a damn fine soldier.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
uh, I think it's really interesting that um, the story is able to present these men as having strong convictions with uh, um, without making it seem like they are without trivializing it, I guess. Like there's a sense, especially with the hopping sides a couple times, of like tribalism. Like, okay, now we're drawing lines based on past friendships, and now we're drawing lines based on um, they're anti-imperials and we're imperials, and now we're drawing lines. You guys are Protestants and we're Catholics. Um, so
Yeah,
there's definitely that, um, but I think that the story does it in such a way where you don't feel that it's not based on genuine beliefs. like Dirk has a close friend who is Catholic because they share political views, and he's a soldier. He fights for those.
Yeah, and has survived.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when he says the Lord's Prayer, you get a sense that he is uh, his faith is one that he takes seriously, at least in that moment.
Yeah, and if for the modern audience, what would occur is some half-hearted recitation that you have to do, and then it's like, well, God's not real, right? We all know this, but no, like that's especially coming up into the Crusade era.
Sure.
If you read firsthand accounts of people, I mean that there's a lot of history that we don't read well enough, and isn't presented well enough, where people have genuine conviction and genuine beliefs, and the almost superhuman nature of some of these kings and knights and soldiers, and I mean even the civilian population, um, who are motivated by seeing the noblemen enact out genuine faith and acts of contrition, and uh, crying over lost battles for holy cities, or crying over redemption of that. Uh, th- we don't get the pessimistic view of that until today with modern audiences, for people who want to write about, the gods and the knights and the swords and chivalry, but then toss it aside, even though within the confines of their own story, they lazily write that. I mean, at least one of the gods is real, it seems, in there, or a demigod of some kind, but uh, we'll just wash it away as like, well, we're not. No one's really a believer here, except for the dude that can't die. Uh, there's a scene in the very classic movie that everyone should watch called Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones, and the 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 story is there's a volcano in L.A. and that's the story. But at the very end, there's a terrible, terrible child, and it makes no sense. And the ash is falling on people, and he's like, "Kid, where's your parents? I don't know. Everyone looks the same." It's like a shoehorn line where it's like, oh, because we're all covered in ash and we should all get together, because if a volcano were to ever erupt in LA, we would all be looking the same. And then the rain comes down and, oh, look, we're healed. And it's hilariously bad. Here's the opposite story of that, where it's characterization done correctly and done within the confines of the story, and done respectfully and within the confines of history, even.
Hmm.
And again, it's that touch point. Are there people that believe? Yes. Are there people who believe but not so much? I mean, these people are flawed to the point. Like if you're the soldier, you're not going to uh, let some barbarous words come out of somebody and that upend an entire peace treaty of your betters. And so so they're flawed, and they're with flawed people, with fallen people, you have the opportunity to tragedy or comedy, and so that's available to us without a terrible child who should have been thrown into the volcano.
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with the length of the story,
Hmm.
how real the characters felt.
Yeah.
Uh, Particularly, I'm gonna scroll back up, check my notes. Dirk and Pierre. Pierre. I don't, my mom took French. She would always pronounce everything the French way. Uh, I remember
Harry.
I remember she read The Tale of Despero to me,
Ah.
and Despero's mother is French, as a French mouse, and she really got into the voice for that. I have very very strong memories of the au revoir part where they send Despero down to the dungeon. And that's not the words you want to hear your mother say. But my mother really threw herself into acting that part.
Yeah, I know these words. Right now, my oldest and I were reading together a Scottish book, and my Scottish tends to fall into Australia many times. So I'm sure I'm doing some damage to a young psyche.
I some stories I try to do something, but a lot of times I'm just like, there's no way that I can do this justice. I'm very very American. I feel quite strongly that I should just say it however I think it should be said.
Yeah, Minnesotian to the south. So you've got your range right there.
Oh man.
But
um,
so yeah, that was actually my second one, which my nerdy side was this has good church history in it, but then good characters established, and then honor and glory is still there. Like
yeah,
I do like that, even though it's like you're gonna spend a night in the haunted house, but I also like that because yeah, this was the haunted house story. You just don't have uh, teenagers who are hopped up on hormones and whatever drug of the moment is for them. It's just bloodlust and
right.
battle.
Instead of kids playing with a Ouija board, we have 6 adults saying the Lord's Prayer while
Right.
drinking booze.
In this story, the Latin is done by the God-fearer. In the Ouija board one, Satan would be talking Latin
Right,
as
yep.
as you would.
Well, the Catholic. So
Yeah. The small town priest who knows like the Babylonian language, and you're like, what?
Yep.
I can only read a few of these from my time in the scriptorium.
Oh man. I think just talking about kind of the mechanics of the short story, since we talked about characterization and we've basically been talking about setting this whole time, um, I think the plot was really nice too, with like the pacing. Felt very natural, and I didn't feel like it ended too soon, if that makes sense. Sometimes with short stories, if the like the buildup is good, the ending feels squashed. But I felt like this one did a very nice job of um, having a decent payoff.
Yeah, and with battles too, because battles are very difficult, I think, to write. There's been many of authors that you've had on that I've taken your advice and I've read the indies, and so far this year, the indies have won over the trad pubs
Nice.
for good stories. And there are very many who understand maybe not so much their limitations, but maybe the audience's limitations. Swings the sword swings back. They plie, they spin around, they twirl their lightsabers at each other, and that's supposed to do something. There's this really good book that I read called Euro's Revenge, where the battles took place over like a 2 minute period, and it was just enough to go, yes, this is exactly what a space battle would be. 2 minutes, people are dead or dying or shot or they've ran for cover, and then it allowed you to kind of reset yourself and allow yourself to be in the moment because the tension was able to be broken because the characters' tension were broken. We're behind the wall. Oh man, I'm glad. Oh, now a demon spirit spy us, and now we have to ramp up the tension again. So that was really good. I'm sure someone has written a really good review on that on periapsispress.com.
Thank you, Patrick.
And so that's what this does. The ramp up to the fighting of the big bad, and then it goes out with a bang pretty well. So
Yeah. I think that for a short story too, having the the supernatural enemy be a physical thing that they can fight
Hmm.
makes it feel more effective within the space because we don't have to have that oh, we're scared now, oh, how do we, like, what exactly is the mechanism by which we will dispel this uh
Yeah.
more spiritual entity, right? It's just hack and slash and smash them.
um, yeah, it's not like a thousand ghosts coming off a ship and then being able to do damage to maybe some orcs, and then you were like, well, how is one done, but not the other one the other way? There is a story coming up. Have you finished the collection so far for this?
I no,
Okay,
I've
so there's a story coming up that almost has the opposite approach to that type of mentality,
okay,
and it'll be. I think you'll enjoy it because it shares similar qualities to the writing here.
nice.
But I won't. No spoilers for you. We're only spoiling for the audience because they refused to. They clicked on the video. They knew it
Yeah.
was there, and they refused to read the great tome that is before us. So yes,
Yeah, well, I will look forward to that.
yes.
I think I would recommend this story. I enjoyed it. I think probably I think it has a lot of the things that I like about indie short stories, just in general. I think it's actually probably a really good example of the the general indie anthology experience for me has very much been short stories that are like have intense action scenes and are maybe a little punchier and are just are just played straight. There's not like some dramatic twist or um, they're not trying to leave you with some mildly unpleasant emotion. Right?
Right.
um, I I when I was reading Tradpub exclusively, I quit doing anthologies because that was like the norm. Was either, oh, it's a twist and it's not what you thought, and I was like, well, I liked what I thought,
Yeah.
or it ended like, and you're like just wah wah tight, like okay.
But before we came on, I was talking about an anthology from a single author writing around the Great Lakes, and there were so many times where I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt in this first story. I'm like, okay, it could be this. Oh, he could be going this route. He could. This is a new telling of the Telltale Heart. Nope, this is a new telling of Psycho. Nope, it just ends. Okay, all right. That's
So weird.
there's a quote by Harlan Ellison. So I've read one of his short stories recently, and I've been kind of fascinated with him as an author. He has a quote where he says that other than the book It and two of the Dark Tower books, there's no reason that Stephen King shouldn't have written everything else that he's ever written in his entire career in novella form for every single thing.
Sure.
I was like, man, no one wants to admit how angrily accurate that is, and I'm not a fan of King's, not from lack of trying or not trying, but just I get the sentimentality from some of those things where it's like, oh yeah, this is like Dean Koontz writing this little short story and then him coming back to it later, where Koontz sometimes you're reading the same thing kind of over, but you're waiting for like the twist, and you're like, okay, this is where the the girl in the wheelchair, but who has psychic powers, and she's with a guy who can't go out in the sunlight, but he's also super smart. Team up, and not okay. We've I've read that story, first part of the story, and now I'm like, okay, now there's psychotic monkeys that are trying to eat people's faces. All right, I'm good. I'm over the hump of the setup of the same thing that I and this story doesn't do that because it starts off by characterization immediately, the challenge of the haunted house, go to the haunted house, and it's not uh, 6 days, 7 nights. It's do a thing, say some words, and then prepare for all heck to break loose, and heck breaks loose.
As you know, it's going to, which
Yeah.
is the wonderful thing.
And it was all a dream, and everyone woke up. They were dead all along.
The old lady actually poisoned their ale
Oh.
back at the pub. They didn't even leave. No,
It's
there's
this
nothing
new
like
weed
that.
called marijuana. Like, oh, okay. See, it was a haunted house story.
Yeah.
It's the origin of the Voorhees family. And the name of the pub was the Voorheesian. Oh.
So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to say. I don't think so. I think I've hit all of the things, all of my notes. Anything you wanna add
Yes.
or
As
go for
as
it?
as as the person who said, "I will read all these stories with you," and instead of reading the first one, I read all of them. Um, I would recommend this one. There are some like mind-altering, good, phenomenally written stories in here. At least for me, I really enjoyed, uh, like as in really enjoyed as within the scope of all these stories. There were some that I didn't so much like, which for anthologies you're going to get that, and that's
Right.
the great thing about anthologies. But there are some super well written stories in here. It reminds me of, I'm gonna say, Periapsis Christmas one. There was one story where my comment was, there was no wasted word or there was no wasted space. And there's a story in here where I had that similar feeling to it,
Nice.
where I'm like, I need you to break the thing that we don't want you to do, which is, yeah, this was a short story collection. Go write your own thing. No, no, I want an entire world. I want to understand exactly what's happening in this world. How did they get to this place in this story? I'm completely hooked and want uh the thing that I never want, which is 7 books that are 1,000 pages to be able to unpack this story. So there are these stories within here. So and there are some really good sci-fi. This one, fantasy-ish. I don't know. I kind of take the death cult approach of, if you want to say it's sci-fi, then it is sci-fi. Let's
Sure.
let's 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 talk about stories rather than classification of things. That's for nerd scientists to do, and we're not nerd scientists. We read about nerd scientists. Um, so just for just one of the stories, but there's two really excellent stories that I liked out of all of them the most. Not to say that the others are bad, um, but I would have purchased this if I knew about just those two stories. So
Nice.
yeah, so we're coming up to it. But then there were
Yeah.
some that were like, you know what, wasn't for me. But also, let's take the temperature. Did they hate me? No. Were they trying to say something? Yep, I got it.
Yep. Yep. So, in conclusion, if you guys are interested in joining us, again, you can reach out to me either on Twitter at Red Hedge Dragon or through the website parapsispress.com. And then you can participate with us and talk about the stories as we come to them. Otherwise, we encourage you to buy The Silence and Starsong. They recently did a crowdfunding campaign for volume 2, right? I don't know
Yes.
if that's still open or not. But there's more if you read all of this and like it. Um, and I have not read anything else by Jason McHuston. Just at the end in italics, it says he is also the author of the sci-fi noir novel project Notebook and the last Star Warden series of sci-fi pulp adventures. And then when this was published, it was still upcoming. I'm not sure if it is out yet. Upcoming illustrated collection, The Brotherhood of Secret Darkness and Other Cults, Cabals, and Conspiracies. Based on this story, I would say that I'm certainly interested in reading some of his longer stuff. And if this sounds interesting to you, you should check him out. Thank you, Patrick, for joining me.
Thank you. I would definitely encourage anyone to hop on so that you can interrupt me more, and we can be overshadowed by non-Midwesterners who are okay with interrupting people. So thank you for having me on. I always appreciate talking to you. I always appreciate listening to your takes, even if it makes me read harder. And I was saying that before I would just say, oh, I didn't really like this. And now I'm angry at books for tricking me into wasting my time, into telling me stories where nothing matters and everything's worthless. But then I still have to care about the story.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I appreciate it.
And like, subscribe, comment, share. And yeah, let me know what you guys are reading, and if you want to have any kind of more specific discussions about sci-fi, fantasy related articles, or specific books that you would like to hear about. Obviously, my focus is mostly indie stuff and fiction, not games or comics. I'm sorry, guys. There's other people who are far more capable as far as games go, and who have more of an artistic sense than I for comics. So I can pick apart a good novel, but all right. Thank you guys so much for sticking out with us, and guys, have a great day.